Good evening, and thank you, Val, for your kind words. I was honored when Val Johnson called and requested that I address this group of labor leaders and trustees. I consider it a privilege to be here tonight because it's important. It's important to labor's cause to communicate and get the message across to as many people as I possibly can. The message that I speak of is the message of change, a message about doing something different than we have in the past, dramatically different, aggressively different. But first, I'd like to tell you about a book I just finished reading because the story correlates with my message. The title of the book is Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. And the story is about the American Indian and how they, as a nation and a society, were systematically and diabolically eliminated. It was a very intriguing book, but also a very sad and depressing story. It made me angry, but I could hardly put it down. And the deeper that I got into the book, the greater the analogy I saw between what happened to the American Indians 100 years ago and what is happening to the American trade union movement today. Bear with me, and you also will see the correlation. The Indians of this country were the pioneers and once the sole inhabitants of America. They were a strong and proud people, living entirely off the land. They band together in different tribes. They weathered all of the elements of the climate and survived droughts and famine. They survived floods and blizzards and natural catastrophes of all sorts, and they were prosperous in their own right. Then, in the mid-1800s, a series of events happened that they could not weather. As strong as they were, they could not overcome this series of events. The railroad tycoons called the events progress. The mine owners called the events free enterprise. The bankers called it capitalism, and the U.S. government called it for the good of the people. When all of these events occurred, the process was thus set in place that would eventually eliminate the once proud, once strong Indian nation from the face of the American plains. The combination of business, along with that of greedy, self-serving entrepreneurs, pushed the Indians off their lands mile after mile and acre after acre. And the Indians never really understood what was happening to them, you see. And when you read this book, you'll understand what I mean. The Indians originally thought that they were indestructible as a society. They had antiquated medicine man theories on how they would be protected from the destructive ways of the white man. For example, the Indians believed that if the medicine man told them to smear war paint over their chest and face prior to going into battle, that war paint would protect them from the bullets and the sabers of the white soldiers. They believed that once the soldiers found they were indestructible, they would leave their lands and let them live on in peace. How naive they were is unbelievable. How wrong they were is history. The Indians fought back. There is no doubt about that. But they eventually came to the realization that war paint and leather shields they wore into battle would not protect them from the white soldiers' bullets. They realized too late that they had to do something different. But they were so divided, they simply did not know what to do. There were so many different tribes, they couldn't even communicate with each other because they each had their own separate language. Each tribe was independent. Some groups sold and bartered with the white traders, and some groups would not. Some tribes settled peacefully on the reservation when ordered to by the government, and some tribes would not. Some tribes hopefully and naively believed that perhaps when the white man built his banks, his railroads, and his mining operations, that they all would be left alone. But they were wrong. They were dead wrong. And year after year, month after month, they were devoured by a word called progress. They were eliminated by a government and by a system that had taken away their land and their rights as a people. As a matter of fact, they were not even considered to be people by the Congress of the United States. In 1875, in the Congressional Record, a declaration was made and duly passed that the Indian was not to be declared a person, and as such was not entitled to any privilege that a regular American would be entitled to. In those days of ignorance, an Indian could not vote because he was not considered to be a person. An Indian could not send his children to school because he was not considered to be a person. An Indian could not own land. An Indian had no rights. In their bewilderment and in defeat after defeat, the Indians were soon intimidated into signing treaties that gave away their God-given rights to their land and their hunting grounds. They signed away their own resources that ultimately would be utilized against them. What happened to this once independent race is no secret. They were, for all practical purposes, virtually eliminated as an effective functioning society. They were delegated to live on reservations, where they were doled out government handouts, and where rampant crime and lack of education prevailed. And there were no exceptions. They all suffered the same fate. The once powerful tribes of hundreds of thousands of Indians were wiped out. The Crow, the Cheyenne, the Sioux, the Apache, and others died a slow death under the pretext of progress. Nothing they could do made any difference. They each had their own system of justice and their own system for welfare, but they were all segregated. They spoke different languages, and they did not act together in unity. They were naive and ignorant of the ways of the white man in his quest for progress. And the system was, in fact, destroying them on a daily basis very, very effectively. Now, I want you to think for a moment. I want you to ask yourself, how does what happened to the American Indian 100 years ago relate to us today in the building trades? How can what happened to millions of Indians who once roamed this United States proud and free relate to us in the building trades? And how could it happen that such a powerful group like the Indians be eliminated, humiliated, degraded, and wiped out? And ask yourself, could that possibly happen to us today in the trade union movement? As I travel from state to state with my message, what I see is not soon forgotten. Declining membership permeates our local unions. Unemployment festers like a malignant tumor throughout the building trades, and the economic security of our members and our locals is being undermined daily by a system that, unless we change it, will destroy us. Let me submit to you this proposition. While I was reading this book, a revelation occurred to me. A revelation that what happened to the American Indian as a society is exactly what is happening to the American trade union movement today, and in particular to the building tradesmen. What happened then to the Crow, the Cheyenne, the Sioux, and the Apache is happening now to the plumbers, the fitters, the carpenters, and the electricians. What happened then to the Navajo, the Comanche, and the Cherokee Indian is happening now to the glaziers, the operators, and the ironworkers. The business climate is ripe for it. The political climate is ripe for it. and the apathy and the ignorance and the arrogance that exists today in the labor movement is ripe for it. I submit to you that unless we as a trade union movement change our way of thinking, we too are doomed to the destiny of failure just like the Indians. Unless we change our way of thinking, we too are doomed to extinction just like the Indians. Don't anyone in this room tell me it can't possibly happen to us. Don't tell me we can paint our face with war paint and that it won't happen to us. It is happening to us right now, today, all over the country. It's happening to us. We must remember that like the Indians, we are in a war. It is a social, an economical, and a political war. And we are the representatives of our members in this battle. We must provide direction to our people, and we must motivate them. No longer can we sit idly by and let big business and big government dictate what they think is right for us and good for them. For it is we are the ones who have the responsibility, and we are the ones who have the authority, and indeed we are the ones who have the stakes in this battle. I submit to you that pension power works, but it does not and will not work without effort. A lot of effort. But there's nothing in this world that comes easy. In this battle for control of our destiny, we must take positive action. And we must demand that our funds get invested in a manner that produce jobs for our membership and prudent returns for our pension funds. I have no tolerance for those who say it can't be done. It can be done. It has been done. You have seen on this film how it is being done today. Our little union has created $300 million worth of work for building tradesmen. What would happen if 5 unions made that same commitment? What would happen if all of the internationals got together in the same room and made that commitment? That's really a joke, isn't it? Can you imagine if all of the general presidents got in the same room and agreed on the same thing on the same day and decided on a strategy for our pension funds? Why, George Meany would roll over in his grave. Reed Larson of the National Right to Work Committee would probably have a heart attack and go to the grave if that ever happened. But I submit to you that if that did happen, we could wipe out unemployment in the building trades movement in this country in a very short period of time. And if that did happen, we would see a swelling in the ranks of our union membership that we haven't seen in 30 years. And if that did happen, big business and big government would know. They would know that they're not going to eliminate us. They would know that the labor movement is here to stay. And we have to stay, for without us, there will be no social justice in this country. Without us, there would stand no obstacle in the path of corporate greed. And without us, the word democracy becomes mere rhetoric, and working people become second-class citizens who will be tolerated, abused, and subordinated. I submit to you that we, the people in this room here tonight, and tradesmen across the country, we have to change. We have to change the way we have been thinking, and we have to change the way we have been acting. A picket line is not effective anymore. And there are those of you in this room that know exactly what I'm talking about. We can't beat them anymore with picket lines. And we can't beat them today in the National Labor Relations Board. And we can't beat them today with the current political climate. But we in the building trades movement in this country have about $90 billion in pension fund assets. And that is our money. It's our money. $90 billion. And that is power. With that kind of power, we can beat them. And we can beat them at their own game. And by following the golden rule. And the golden rule is, if you've got the gold, you make the rules. We must remember our roots. This country and our labor unions were not built by people who took no for an answer. This country and our unions were not built by men and women who marched to the tune of the same drummer. Our unions were built by people who worked with their hands and fought with their fists. Our unions were born out of desperation, and we survive only out of determination. And we must use all of the economic power that we have in our possession to ensure that our trade unions are not wiped out like the American Indian was. Because we, unlike the Indian, have the right to vote. And we, unlike the Indian, speak the same language. And we have the right to send our children to school. But most important, we have the method, the means, and the economic power to win this war. I am talking about pension power. We must speak out. We must demand. And we must act aggressively. In closing my remarks, let me leave you today with this thought. The path to winning is not the path of least resistance. Our union movement in this country today must move forward out of this quicksand called ignorance. And we must throw off this blanket called fear, and we as an entity must dare to challenge, and we must dare to demand. Because the backbone of a democratic society is a strong and free trade union movement. And a free trade union movement is what the United States of America is all about. Thank you very much.